Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always we have Matt, Rainier, and Devin. And as a basic general person who's here all the time is Robert Cron.
Hello,
Um,
friends.
on this week's episode, we're going to be going over a list by James Ledbetter. And we have kind of several things that we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about the new models that came out for Dale. We're going to talk about my experience at a tournament I just recently went to. And we're going to be going over a couple of Q&A questions as well. So I guess the main point for today will be the Q&A, but we're going to talk about a couple other things that have popped up as well. So we'll go into the list first. So James has an 800-point Lothlorien list, and he has Galadriel with 1 Galadriel warrior with banner and shield, 3 Galadriel court guard, 8 Galadriel warriors with shield, 5 Galadriel warriors with spear and shield. He has Rumel with 2 guards of the Galadriel court, 5 Galadriel warriors with shield, 5 Galadriel warriors with spear and shield. And then he has Haldir with heavy armor and bow, and he has 2 Galadriel warriors with bow, 3 Galadriel knights with shield, and 2 Wood Elf warriors with bow. So he has 45 models at 800 points and 9 might points. He says he plans on casting Blinding Light at the start. The 2 Wood Elf warriors are used to harass the side of the force. The cavalry will be used for item-based scenarios. If he would expand it to 1,000 points, he'd likely ally in Legolas and the Galadriel Captain Mounted. He'd like to keep it pure and is not a big fan of Celeborn, but would be open to the idea of including him. He's thinking about converting him to have more Galadriel-like armor. Also, he watched the Lothlorien. This is what he came to conclusions based on what we spoke about. So the main weaknesses is that he says he has a lack of heroic march and lack of strength 4, but you're going to deal with that with elves. I actually like this list. I'm a little hesitant on Rumel. I know he brings an extra point of might, but I think we've talked about in that episode how much we like the Galadriel Captain Mounted and what he can do for this army, because it does lack a little bit of hitting power. So I think 10 points cheaper, correct me if I'm wrong, I think for 10 points cheaper, you get a more hitting hero. Rumel's great.
If you get him mounted, he is, I think the Galadriel Captain is actually 5 points more expensive.
5 points more. Okay, I apologize.
Yep.
Maybe it's the base cost without the horse.
Well, it's because it's because you have to spend the 15 points on the armored horse. Its base cost is 70.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think I would add the captain in because, like you said, you're missing March. That solves that issue. But also at that point, even if he runs out of might because you March, you still have a fight 6 captain on armored horse with an elven blade, which a lot of people are going to struggle to go against. So he can do a lot of damage there. I actually really like the addition of the 3 Galadriel Knights. I think this army has always needed a little bit more hitting power. I think adding that to them will really help them out. And like you said, you can go for objectives. And you know what I said in the Lothlorien episode, which is I love to spam out as many elves as possible. And I think when you have 45, it really makes it difficult to kind of break through a force like this, especially because they're fight 5, they're courage 5. Pretty much the whole thing is defense 6. You have 5 Galadriel Court Guard. I actually kind of like that. Maybe I would consider dropping 1, but I'm pretty okay with 5, to be honest with you. 2 Wood Elf Warriors, probably for points, I would imagine. But yeah, I actually really, really like this list. I'd probably actually almost consider taking this myself if I were to take 800-point Lothlorien. But Matt, I'll go over to you first. What are your thoughts?
Okay. So I think, by the way, that the Wood Elf Warriors are there probably for objective holders and for their elven cloaks. I think they're only like 1 point cheaper than the regular Galadriel. So let me discuss a couple of minor tweaks, and then I'll discuss kind of a larger change that if you want to consider. So a couple tweaks. One is where the banner is. Were I to design this list, I'd probably put the banner behind your Killy guy, and Galadriel is not the Killy guy. I guess with Rumil, so Rumil's the one who's a little tougher, has the reroll the 6 thing, but does not have heroic strike. Haldir is kind of the less tough of the two, but has heroic strike. You probably want to put the banner behind one or the other of those, because those are the guys who are probably going to be going forward and fighting. Galadriel's got a bunch of Galadrim warriors with her. So I guess the next topic I'd want to talk about is Warband Construction. This has 2 warbands of fighters, one led by Galadriel, one led by Rumil, and then one warband of bows led by Haldir. That's not how I would construct this, because with this particular list, I think, especially since it doesn't have March, I think you want to be leery about having one warband that's just all bows. I think you want to integrate your bows in with the rest of the warbands, so you have 3 warbands that can fight. So that if Haldir's stuck out on his own, if he gets a bad roll on Maelstrom of Battle, it doesn't mean that like all of your archers are going to get overrun. And also, you tend to want your archers to be kind of near the blinding light so that they can shoot out of it. And I think it's helpful to have Galadriel have those. And then I can tell you about how I usually do a Lothlorien list. This may or may not be the correct way to do a Lothlorien list, but it's what I found to be effective. Is I tend not to go with just Galadrim warriors with bows. I think it's fine to have a couple of Wood Elf warriors with bows just to sit on an objective, hide behind a tree with their elven cloak and plink out of it. But the Galadrim warriors with bows, I tend to give spears as well, and they form the second line behind the guys with the shields. So they can shoot out of that shield wall, basically so they can hide behind the defense 6 guys in the first place. And then they can, once the lines clash, they can contribute to the fighting. Because even with 45 models, you're spending too many points on a Galadrim warrior with a bow to not have him fight in the end. You're going to need to pitch them in. And if you're going to pitch them in, you want them to double as the spear supports behind the other Galadrim warriors and defense 6 guys. So I would consider kind of monkeying around with your warband distribution, so you have the capability to form 3 mini shield walls with some shooting coming out of it. I think primarily the bows would be in Galadriel's warband, because that's kind of what's going to cause the base of fire, and then the other 2 warbands could kind of press forward behind Haldir and Rumil. So anyway, those are kind of the small changes that I would suggest to this. The big change that at least I would consider to this list, and I know you say you don't like the Celeborn model. I do like the Celeborn model. My typical loadout at 750 points above and above for Lothlorien is Galadriel, Celeborn, Captain. And
if I may say something, I think he actually just physically doesn't want the Celeborn model.
Yeah, I know. So, I know.
Okay, so I mean, I would just proxy it. Like I would just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's true. You can use a different
model.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's not the profile he's against.
Yeah, use Rumil if you use his figure and say this is Celeborn. He's got different armor.
Or use Thranduil with a head swap or something.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone will have a problem with. Well, I think you'll have to make some kind of conversion, because I think it's straight up proxy. I think in GBHL tournaments they don't like that, but it depends on where you're at.
Yeah, it does depend. But anyway, so Celeborn. I mean the Galadriel Celeborn Captain mix solves your heroic march problem. Gives you more killing power because Celeborn can enchant his blades. And gives you a point less might, but that's not all that critical with this particular list. So that may be one thing to think about. I mean, I think that the problem I always have, well, I don't think I've ever taken a Rumil Haldir Galadriel mix. I've always been kind of afraid of it, precisely because that lack of march and lack of hitting power, because you only really have one guy with heroic strike, and that's Haldir, and he's only got 2 attacks. You've got Galadriel, who can make up for some of that with transfix, but being able to have Celeborn in there, get that third attack, and he's Lord of the West, so essentially he has a fourth attack to win stuff, and his ability to enchant blades, and you get the second transfix. He brings a lot to the party that Haldir doesn't. You'd probably have to get rid of a few figures in this, so you're going to have a smaller army, but I don't think your army is going to get that smaller. You need to find, I think, if you're going to substitute him for Rumiel and substitute Haldir for the captain, you need to find probably like 60 points or so worth of figures, which you can probably do. If you're going to mount the captain, you can probably dispense with one of the mounted Galadrim knights. You can probably get rid of one guard of the Galadrim court, so you've got 2 pairs of 2. That's what I usually use. And maybe you consolidate some of your Galadrim figures so that you got guys with bows and spears making up that second line.
Okay. Devin, thoughts?
I'm gonna have to almost want to pass on even making too much commentary on it, mostly because the strikes me the part of the list that I fear most of this is the 45 model count. I'm not sure that reducing model count to add Celeborn really makes me fear it more, unless you took out, I want to almost say Galadriel, but I know losing Blinding Light is
I have played against lists without Galadriel, and it has done well because you have the resistant to magic. Yes, you lose the Blinding Light, but I actually think you can very well do this list without Galadriel and just substitute for Celeborn.
Yeah, there's and I haven't tried it, but I'm glad, Tim, then that you have some experience with it, because I don't know how much Galadriel is actually adding to the list. Now, I get it if you don't have March and you don't have Blinding Light, then that means you're kind of a victim of Corsair shooting waves and stuff. So, then okay, you might have to exchange Rummel for a captain, exchange Galadriel and then have a lot of hitting power. So you have now the combination of a 45 model count army that's all pretty well defensive. Most of your guys have shields, most of them are defense 6. They're all 5/5, so you can really play a war of attrition pretty well combined with having 3 combat characters. So it's almost Galadriel that I'm considering removing, but I hesitate to say it because I haven't actually played Lothlorien with no March and no magic whatsoever with Galadriel. So I think if I were to do that, I think I would have to double down on saying swap Rummel for a captain if you're going to do the Celeborn option. But I don't think the list is bad the way it is, but I definitely don't fear it because you don't have anything hard hitting. It's beyond the lack of strength 4. It's you don't have even heroes worth bothering with at 800 points. I'm throwing Dane around. I'm throwing you're getting all the big bads at 800 points. I just am not. And then you have just Galadriel to tackle a single target, which she can do pretty effectively. But I think if I throw 2 solid hitters at you, I don't know, Last Alliance army with Elendil and Gilgalad, I'm just going to run over this thing. So that's my main thought. So I'm not saying the list is bad, but it lacks a serious threat. But then again, I know that I've seen lists like this make top tables. So like I said, not a bad list. If you kept it exactly the same, I think you'd do well, which is why I'm I do echo though what Matt said about moving the banner. If you do want to have all the bows in one warband, if you must do that, I actually, wouldn't stick him with Haldir. He's actually kind of your only other combat hero. You're probably going to throw him with Galadriel, and then, but otherwise, divvying him up is probably the better option. Similar to how you did the Galadriel Court Guard a bit. And then probably maybe even distributing the knights, because the knights' real only purpose is objective runners. Then it's you really don't want them all landing in a single warband and being oh, we have to move fast, especially, so that's the other comment I'll make. But it's not a bad list, but it is the 45 model count that makes me like it. So
there are a couple of uses to keeping a couple of the knights in fights, just because you can throw them in, especially out on the flanks where you can throw them in against somebody who's just fighting an elf or an elf and a spear and just knock that guy down. If you win, and then you're probably going to kill him, as opposed
I'm not implying never throw him into combat.
Yeah.
It's just in his text below, he said he was using them as objective runners.
Right.
So obviously if the scenario is to the death, then throw him into combat. certainly so. And I don't think he intends not to, like, if there's no objective, I don't think he's going to be like, all right, we'll sit him off to the side.
Yep.
Okay. Rob?
I mean, it's a little bit hard to add anything more to what both Devin and Matt said there. I pretty much agree with everything. If you're going to stick with this army purely as it is, rearrange the warbands for sure. On that note, since you are lacking, all of the things that you have self-identified as lacking, specifically, lack of killing power and march. If that's the case, and you're not going to fix those specific things, which I think you should with the addition of the captain, for example, but I would add more bows, honestly, because you're not even at your bow limit, and that kind of range
14.
capability from behind blinding light is actually going to be some of your killing power, right? So one way to do that, and one way I would probably do that, is to drop the shields on the knights and just give them bows, honestly. I've done that a lot with, like, say, mounted citadel guard. And I mean, a cavalry warrior, if you're already going into a fight like that and you're knocking over, you're probably going to kill anyway. And if you're going to be sitting back on objectives, then you actually have that bow to interact with the game a little bit. But in general, I would add more bows to the list. But that said, I either agree with changing up the heroes to the lineup that Matt had mentioned, the Celeborn Galadriel captain. I think that's a pretty good lineup, even if it costs you a little bit of numbers, or just dropping Galadriel, as Devin and Tim mentioned. I think both of those things would kind of give this list a little bit of a boost in that sense. But again, I mean, 45 elf bodies, right? 45 bodies, mostly D6 and fight 5. Even it's like pizza, right? Even when it's bad, it's good kind of thing. So I definitely think that in competent hands, it can do very well with some of the tweaks, right? Especially on rearranging the warbands and I would say upping the bow limit.
Okay. Rainier? You might be muted, Rainier.
No, he turned himself off mute. Yeah, we can't hear him.
That's okay.
Yeah, no worries. Rainier agrees with us because
because we're right, and he knows we're right.
He knows.
I mean, I just want to.
Rainier, just move your lips. We'll W.
Oh,
he'll come back. He'll come back.
Yeah, he'll come back. He'll be there.
One thing I just wanted to add in defense of keeping Galadriel in here, because I think you can do that. You can take Galadriel out. You can substitute Celeborn, and then it's Celeborn and the two kids, or Celeborn and one of the kids and a captain. But Galadriel is useful in combination with the Guard of the Galadriel Court, because, like, in a Galadriel Celeborn captain mix, the captain is just going to be killing warriors. Celeborn can take on a heavy on his own, just because of who he is and what he can bring to the table, especially with spear supports and stuff like that. And the other thing that can kind of at least check a hero is Galadriel just bombarding that hero with transfixes, and then the Guard of the Galadriel Court just moving in behind whoever that hero has charged. Because you end up in that circumstance, if it's a fight 6 hero, and it's a fight 6 mounted hero, he charges in on, an elf, and a second elf then charges in, and then a couple Guard of Galadriel Court comes in, and then he gets transfixed, so he can't strike. And then it's, fight 6 with 3 attacks. That's not going to be making any wounds against, fight 6 with 4 or 5 attacks, where if the guy loses the combat, he's at the very least going to lose his horse. And that can basically take a hero out of play. So it's just something to think about with Galadriel. Using her in combination with the Guard of the Galadriel Court is a useful little trick.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now. Welcome back.
Perfect. Here we go. I'm like, why aren't they answering what I say? How rude. This whole time I'm on mute. Okay. I think Rumel has heroic defense though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. I'm just looking at army. I wouldn't change it too much. I agree with everything Matt said, the composition, and what Rob said, like max out the bows, change up the war bands. But I don't know if I'd try to change it too much to where you lost the numbers. If anything, maybe Rumel for a captain to get heroic march. but I see this army kind of like I see Easterlings. Easterlings have movement. They get there, then they die, and they win the scenario game. These elves don't have the movement, but they survive and they win the scenario game. So I like the fight 5, fight 6 everywhere. I like even how you have defense 6 almost all around. So yeah, I don't think I'd change the heroes unless it was Rumil for a captain. And even Rumil, I like him there because he can just stop stuff from happening. Back to like playing a defensive game, you won't die. You just heroic defense with him, heroic defense with Galadriel, and like hope to like kill some stuff. So yeah, that's all I have to
actually,
say.
The numbers that I actually was the reason I didn't want to do the whole Galadriel Celeborn combo because I actually kind of like the 45.
Yeah,
I
it's disgusting.
When I go against, I've gone against, and I want to point out, he also mentions if Orphan comes out, he might add them, but we won't talk about him really just because we don't know what
speculation.
He's gonna be like. Yeah. But we just don't know what he'll be like. So assuming he is better, we obviously would suggest to put him in, but until we know otherwise, we can't suggest that. But when I go against Galadriel with a couple of, he has 5 guard of the Galadriel court, it doesn't really matter a ton to Galadriel's defense because you just put the guards in on a hero and you just try to transfix the hero and then they don't really do anything. It doesn't make a difference because more than likely they're not fight 7. And even if they were fight 7, if you transfix them, they're not winning the fight anyway. So it's really good to have Galadriel in that respect. But I have to say, I do fear Celeborn a little bit more than Galadriel just because of what he adds to the list. But when you have Galadriel in the list, it makes it so near enough no other army in the game is out shooting you. You're coming to them because you have Blinding Light plus the amount of bows at strength 3 with 3+ shoot value. But I actually kind of almost agree with Matt to a certain extent. If you can not lose too many numbers, I think Galadriel and Celeborn is the way to go because those two together with Haldir is not fun to go against whatsoever. As long as you don't lose, I'd say more than probably 7 models, I would probably consider doing that as an upgrade because at that point you're still at 38 models, and I still think that's really tough to go against. Because every time I go against Galadriel, I'll be honest with you, I think I've played them roughly 60 times, and I think I've actually.
I'm glad you count. Like,
yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, for anyone listening to this podcast doesn't know, Tim has more combat experience against Galadriel than any other human, like on Earth.
Yeah, certainly more than any of us combined.
There's just like a wall in your house where you get home and you etch it with a knife, right? Another battle against Galadriel.
Yeah, he actually has Haldir's head mounted on a plaque on his wall.
I bring it as a banner so that he knows what's coming.
So for those who aren't in on the joke, Tim's only opponent in Syracuse, New York, is a guy who refuses to play any other army than Lothlorien, and this is the reality.
I think what it is because I've talked to him about this a couple times. I think he's kind of interested in getting into Corsairs, but I don't think he's gotten the models yet. But I don't know. It just hasn't happened yet. But I imagine he'll try to get another army. But basically, yes, I only play Lothlorien when I play like custom games with him. So I have a very good amount of experience against Galadriel. And I have to say, out of I use an example 60 games. I think I've only ever gotten them to 25%, maybe twice. They're a very good defensive army, and I've probably broken them like 15 out of 60 times. Like they just don't break, especially when you get high number counts, like Devin and myself were talking about. They're just so hard to break through because when you've got defense 6 and fight 5 in a banner, especially, it's not easy to get through that. I actually think you need to play this army very defensively and move off of the objectives. Like there's no reason I think you should be going all out with this army, even with those numbers. It's there to hold the line, and it does a very good job of doing so, in my opinion. But yeah, I like this list. If you went either way, if you kept Galadriel or if you went with Celeborn, I think it works. I think for a general consensus, we're saying maybe drop Rumil for the Galadriel captain on horse, because I think he adds a little bit of hitting power, and it also adds the march. And if you can keep the model count up, then definitely do so. Maybe try to fit Celeborn in there. But thank you for your list. And if you use it in any games or tournaments, let us know how you do with it. I am curious to see how somebody else does with Lothlorien. I don't really meet many people who play it. But we'll move on to the next topic, which is the new Dale garrison that got promoted, which is the new models and the new way it's going to kind of be played. Rob, if you want to kind of go over that in general for everyone.
Yeah, so we had an article come out on Warhammer Community, last week, I want to say, and it gave us a preview of what the new Dale models that are coming with what is, assumed to be a supplement coming up now that we've also had Dane and Thorin Stonehelm. And they're really, really cool. And in this article, they not only showed us some pictures of them, but also previewed a couple of the rules. So I don't know if you kind of want to go through each of them individually, or if you want me to just summarize what they are all at once.
No, let's go through each of them individually.
Perfect. So the first one that they showed us was one that we kind of knew was coming because it was included as a bit of a call out in the Thorin and Old Dane profile, and that is King Brand of Dale. So War of the Ring era King Brand of Dale. And he is a really cool model. He's got kind of a pose that is reminiscent on some of the concept artwork that they did for the Hobbit movies when they were considering showing some of like the Third Age Dale stuff. Rules wise, they do give us a bit of a preview on some of the things he's going to do. Unsurprisingly, he's going to be a hero of legend. Also,
I like how he's a hero of legend, even though he only shows up in the appendix.
Right. That's right. He's a legend. We don't know if he exists, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And he's also going to have a 12-inch standfast, which kind of it's a little bit of a callback to Bard, who he is the descendant of. Skilled warrior with a fight value of 5 and 3 attacks. They do say that he dies, so even though it's not explicitly written out, I imagine that means 1 fate at best. And then he's going to have a rule called Stoic Fighter, where if he is trapped or would be trapped if he lost a fight, he can reroll a single d6 to both win the fight and a single d6 when rolling to wound. So that's actually pretty interesting. When he gets trapped, he kind of gets better at fighting. And that opens up some kind of interesting plays that you can do with the character. Now, we obviously don't know all of his defensive stats, so I don't know how wise it is to trap him, right? He might be crappy defense, probably 1 fate. It doesn't say he has heroic defense or even strike, so we don't actually know, but it is an interesting rule. So that's King Brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame Dale doesn't have pikes, I suppose, if you're gonna trap your own guy. But...
Well, I mean, the
new spears are kind of like pikes.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll talk about the new spears when we get there.
Yeah.
But
well, so I mean, you can just choose to trap your own guy if you want to, right? By just
if you really want to
stacking people behind him, right? So I actually think that there is some interesting things that opens up, because if he's trapped and he's rerolling a d6 and has 3 attacks, and then he's got a banner nearby, he's rerolling 2 of his dice, right? Mm-hmm. So you're probably getting the 6 with him in the combat. Now, obviously, if you're fighting something that's going to roll you anyway, that's a really bad idea. But it is, interesting that you can do some neat tricks with him that way.
So here's an FAQ in the making. And that's because it said the way, I mean, we haven't seen the actual rule and how it's drafted, but the way this is written is his Stoic Fighter special rule means that if he is trapped, should he lose a fight, he can reroll a single d6 to win the fight. If he's got a spear support behind him in a battle line, he could choose whether or not to be trapped.
Yeah,
correct.
So he can always be trapped if you. But once again, we don't know the wording. But if written that plainly, then he's always trapped if you want him to be.
Yeah. FAQ.
If the rule works kind of as worded or clearly intended, it's neat. Like with some of the other characters that have rules that key off of trapping, like Ingold and others, there's going to be some level of we need an FAQ on this because like this entire scenario is weird. But
that's not what we meant.
Yeah, Ingold I think has a few FAQs already.
Ingold's had like 6 FAQs, and I still don't think it's properly explained personally. I just don't
really
run him
not
anymore, right?
Yeah.
So very cool, but I like the original where it's just like he doesn't trapped. Fine, it's not that good. It's not that powerful.
Yeah, no. I mean, what they turned it into was basically a hot mess. But
yeah.
Well, I mean, I like that he has fight value 5 and 3 attacks, which I mean, there's 2 immutable rules with Games Workshop and Figures, right? And that's being fat is good and being old is bad. And speaking on behalf of those of us who are of a certain age in this hobby, I'm glad that he retained his 3rd attack here, and hopefully he doesn't have like some other crippling disability special rule for being.
Wait, how old is he in this fight?
Well, I mean, his hair. I think he's pretty old. I think he's in his 60s. But I mean, his hair is white if you look at the figure.
Okay.
I'm not actually sure if we know in Tolkien specifically how old he is, but I imagine late 50s to 60s is probably a good bet, right?
Yeah.
He does look fairly spry for an old guy, though, with this pose. He's got kind of like that squat going and sword ready to go. It's a very cool model.
He's been doing the yoga. He's been staying flexible and making sure that the muscle tone stays. So.
Or they just forgot to include the chair that comes on his base that he's actually sitting down on. But
I mean, it's not like Balin where he kind of let himself go to seed. But
okay. Do we want to talk about probably the most talked about thing with the new edition, which is the spear support models?
Well, wait a second. First, we got his son. Can't forget his son.
Okay, we can go to the son. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, if there's nothing else to say about
I think more in depth, it should come when the profiles are released.
It's a little bit hard. I'm just going to assume that the viewers will be pulling up the pictures of the model in front of them so that they know what we're talking about, and listeners will just have to imagine it in their mind's eye. So the next profile is Bard II, who is the son of Brand and another descendant of the original Bard from the Hobbit era. He is another pretty cool model. He's got kind of this almost like wildernessy cloak on with little like fur on it. That's pretty neat. And he's in an action pose with a spear. Another very really
nice model.
I'm a big fan
of this model.
Yeah. And from what I can tell, there's like fur lining on his cloak, and it's just a really, really cool model. Very, very well sculpted. Very excited about that one. Rules wise, what do they tell us about him? Again, he is a natural fighter. He has a fight value of 5 at 3 attacks, and they do say that he has both strike and defense as heroic actions. They say he's got defense 7 and 2 points of fate, and then he's got the he adopts the fighting style of the Knights of Dale because he's also armed with a spear and a shield, which we'll get to in the next profile. But or maybe we just kind of have to talk about it now because otherwise he doesn't make any sense. So basically, if he is charged, he gets +1 to wound with his spear. So it's like a reverse lance, basically, where it kicks in when he is charged rather than when he charges, which is also super cool. And I don't think we've seen anything like that yet before in the game. So I'm into it.
This guy's
more
a beast.
Of a fan of that, or less of a fan of like? Would you rather have the spear, or would you rather have that benefit when someone charges you, or vice versa? Like
I think it's a good way to like balance it because a lot of people are getting burly. I think it would have made sense if they made these rules and incorporated that back in the day with a pike, because it would stop cavalry charges and other charges. It just makes sense historically. Mm-hmm. But I think this guy's a beast. Fight 5, 3 attacks, defense 7, strike, and defense. And he'll probably come out at like 115 points or something. Like this guy has it going on. And I like the typical Games Workshop when it comes to Lake Town aesthetic. They're like, oh, let's put shoulder pads on him and make him 1 more defense. Like,
he's probably wearing some wicker underneath of his little wilderness coat. So
exactly. you can see some mail peeking out underneath all the fur down there at the bottom.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to assume he'll be a hero of valor, so that he's just under his dad. I think if he's already got fight 5, 3 attacks. 3 might is probably not out of the question. So I think he'll actually be a really, really solid little fighter. And I mean, all these crazy mounted heroes that just want to go hero killing, running into him is a risk, right? Because strikes up, and if you lose, +1 to wound, I mean, your horse is dead no matter what, right? But like, that's scary, right?
Yeah.
So he's a troop killer too at fight 5 too. Like he's like what we all wanted Raza to be, basically.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't
He's
want
like,
to talk about Raza.
Poor
fixed
Raza.
all the
Oh.
holes with Raza's like 50-50. I'm gonna die or kill, and I can't kill anything over fight 4. Like he's Raza.
I was so disappointed with Raza.
Raza's such an amazing model too.
I
right?
know.
Like, it's so good.
wanted- he was the solution that all Harad players were looking for, which is we don't have a ton of might. He gives 3. We don't have heroic strikes. He gives heroic strike, and he has the ability to kill people on foot. Great. What's the problem? Nope. Fight 4. But anyway, that's just a little rant I have about Raza because I was so excited for him, and then he turned into that. But it's a very good profile. I definitely think, you know what he kind of reminds me of? He's like that profile of like, what's the dwarves with I can't think of the name of the army, Erebor, I think, where even though the head honcho Thror is supposed to be like the best model, it's really kind of the under models that are kind of better than him because he ends up having the one fate. So you kind of prefer the other models over him, but it doesn't mean Bard will be bad. It's just that his son is better, in my opinion, right off the start, depending on the points. But
yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of this will depend on the points and, as Matt put it, any hidden crippling weaknesses they're not writing about, right? But like on the face of what is said in this article, I think it's pretty awesome. So
yeah.
I mean, just given that, I mean, I know you asked that question, Tim, about which better to get +1 on the charge or +1 when you get charged. I mean, imagine off the initial, like I might say, like, oh, when charging, because that you have the agency, like you can choose to have it happen. But I mean, I guess that, there's a lot of potential for being charged. And it kind of has this weird psychological effect, even though it's not much more than just burly, which I guess is a big deal. I imagine some people might rethink their charges.
Yeah.
Like
It's going to play well with the army too, because you're going to have spam Esgaroth bows.
Yeah.
And they're going to be sitting back and you're like,
it's a very good little combo.
Yeah, that's the tactic, right? Is you build your, I mean, so I think what that rule will kind of bring out is and if somebody said this is, you'd think this is how pikes should work, but it's going to bring out this kind of traditional Greek Roman phalanx type of situation where you have like just the wall of spears and you put. So anyway, I guess we should talk about the Knights of Dale, which are the warrior figure that they're promoting here.
Yeah, so why don't we go over real quick?
Talk about them, and then we can talk about tactically.
And then we'll talk about Dale as an army after this release in general, because there's a lot to say there. So the last profile and set of models, it's a set of 3 models, is the Knights of Dale, which are the city's elite guard founded by the ancestors of Girion and reinstated following Dale's rebuilding, and they protect the royal line of Dale, and they're led by Prince Bard. The models are outstanding. I've already been a Dale fanboy from day one, and I was the crazy person who bought like 1 million of that plastic kit back in the Hobbit era.
Oh, that was
like,
you?
For me, that was like, this is everything I've wanted out of Dale and never dreamed I'd ever get. But they really are cool models. They've got this kind of stoic pose with their spears and shields at the ready, so little crests on their helmets. They look a little bit like the concept art again from the Hobbit movies and the appendices. Just really, really cool. But importantly, their rules, so as we talked about with Prince Bard, they all have the same reverse lance rule. So they have heavy armor, shields, and spears, and their spears get +1 to wound when they are charged. The fact that it says they have heavy armor, if you compare them to a Warrior of Dale, I assume that means they're also going to be defense 6, because Warriors of Dale have armor and are defense 5, right, with shields. And they haven't explicitly said this anywhere, but they keep talking about how they protect the princes of the city. So I don't think like a bodyguard rule is too out of the question potentially. And so they're just a new elite troop option for Garrison of Dale armies that are super, super rad.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are clearly meant to be the front rank of the shield wall so that they get that +1 to wound when somebody charges in. And you did point out that these look a lot like the concept art. I mean, it is a very different aesthetic than I think anything else that you see in the Lord of the Rings range. These guys, if you take a look at them, are very Greco-Roman. I mean, they've got the crossways horsehair plume, which comes off of a Roman centurion's helmet. The the way their helmets are designed is very reminiscent of like a Greek hoplites.
Yeah, it's very Corinthian helm style. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that kind of that telegraphs a bit about how they're supposed to be used. I mean, I see these guys and I'm like, ooh, this looks like a Greek phalanx.
Yeah.
And I think that's, kind of what they're intended to do. And
then,
tactics are going to be, how do you get them to charge your phalanx?
Well, so that's the really interesting thing, right? Like usually if you have an elite troop, and I'm assuming these will be more elite, more expensive, and they have a spear, you want to put them in the back rank, right? Whereas these guys you expressly do not want in the back rank, which is kind of reverse of everything you would instinctively want to do. And then when it comes to tactics, it's kind of like you want them to charge you, so you're giving up some of your like tactical mobility, and you're hoping you lose priority for that reason. But on the other hand, if they do win priority, they have to think about whether to charge you. So it's like this weird standoff, right? Where there's like a risk reward system that I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're going to see these guys spammed because they're like
I was just going to ask,
but like with more
killing for you to spam them.
I think if you have 11 points, they can be extremely expandable.
I agree.
That, depending on the point cost, you're talking about the end of ever playing the Warriors of Dale.
That's not true because you're just going to see bows.
The bows are the best part of that army.
That's right.
But you're just going to see a whole bunch of sad Huskarls just in the background, just like moping about it. But I like the idea because like I've actually seen quite a lot of Dale spams because Marcus from our group plays it all the time. And it is a really, really good list. It shoots the heck out of things. But the one problem it comes across is once combat hits it, it crumbles. And I play Corsairs against it, and I was like, okay, 2 spams, 2 good shooting, but once combat hit the Corsairs just killed them. But I like this idea because it gives it that killing power. The 2 heroes, I don't think they're going to be too expensive, and they're hero of legend, probably hero of valor. You can spam with that, and then these guys, it's just like, okay, let's say 11, 12 points for something that's better than a Fountain Court Guard, and especially better in this army context. I think this is going to be a really good list, and that's not even taken into account when you ally it with Erebor or other things. Like this is...
Yeah, they do call out that the Garrison of Dale, when it goes to the Third Age with these characters, is a historic ally, I think, with Erebor. Or maybe that was in the Dane profile, but somewhere it was called out that Dale and Erebor Reclaimed become historical allies in the Third Age, which makes sense, right? So
I think the main thing that'll stop these things from being spammed, to be honest, if they're 11 points or less, assuming 11 points, assuming having the bodyguard rule and all of that, or maybe less, but is monetary cost. I think the actual dollars, because they show them in a pack, like those of 3, which means they're probably coming in a pack of 3. So I think,
and they're probably going to be $33.
$33,
yeah.
So I think that is what'll stop them from being spammed.
You spam 30 of them, and that's like 300 and something.
You'll see people coming in and being like, "Can you just pretend my Warriors of Dale?" Or
well, I mean, I don't think you want to spam. I don't think there is any point to having more than half of your army consist of these guys.
I agree with that because you still want to get around 52 to 54 models in an 800-point army. So like if you do spam them half or any more, like you are losing that horde aspect.
And we don't know the profiles too.
Yeah.
So I mean, this may be a case of like the Easterling acolytes, where it's like you think you'd want to spam.
All I'm saying is this: if Easterlings only get the acolytes, I'm probably going to sue.
I think you're actually party to a much larger group there. Yeah,
and I think I'll get a class action.
I actually think all of us would join that class action, to be honest.
I'm curious though, just last little question. If you were to come up against these guys, knowing that if you charge them, they get +1 to wound, how are you dealing with that in a game?
Throwing spears.
Well, we don't know all
spears thrown. Yeah,
we don't know all of their rules, but imagine if you
assuming they're fight 4, defense 6 with that special rule.
Yeah, I mean, that throwing weapons of range. I mean, obviously Dale's not an army that hesitates to shoot back, so that's gonna be.
Well, you have elf bows behind them too, and you can to Matt's point, you have a warrior of Dale with an Esgaroth bow and a spear, right? So they do fight.
We're in a weird dilemma. You really just have to take the charge. You just have to charge. Like, I mean,
charge them with like a hero that you know is going to kill them and stuff. And then I think they're going to be defense 7 too, because what's his face is
defense 7.
Ooh.
I think they might be, because if you see they look like Warriors of Dale, but they have the shoulder pads. And I
That's
think
true. So they're probably D8.
the shoulder pads
Oh,
are
wow.
going to they're probably D10 actually, because what's his face plays.
If
I
these
bet
guys
they're
are
gonna be
D7,
defense.
then you will see a lot less alliances with the actual Erebor troops, I think.
I could be wrong. I'm just saying, like, with the theme of a wicker basket and like a chainmail coming down earring, like they're defense 5.
I think
So
these guys are
these
going to be
guys-
defense 6. And the reason I think
Okay.
these guys are going to be defense 6 is because they are equipped the same as Bard the Second, and Bard the Second gets the extra +1 defense for being a hero.
Yeah.
So they're going to be 1 less defense than he is. We know he's defense 7, so I think these guys are going to be defense 6.
I actually
I
imagine
think
that
it'd be good.
you're going to take your Warrior Vidale as a template, right? And then just add the heavy armor on top, and then the
Yeah.
reverse lance rule,
I think
and then
7
maybe
is unlocked.
bodyguard. But
Right.
they're still going to essentially be a Warrior of Dale at fight 4 and defense 6, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I think that's my call too.
I know the best way to defeat that, though. You take 100 Woses and you shoot blowpipes at
I'm
them.
having trouble hearing you, Tim.
Oh, am I cutting out? I apologize.
No, it's just low volume.
Low volume. Let me see if I can. Is that any
Wow.
better?
Project.
So you said you'd blow pipe them to death?
I'd take 100 Woses and I'd just blow pipe them to death.
I just take 100 camels and stomp them to death.
Well, I don't think you need 100 camels. I think you just need 40 or 50 Corsairs with throwing weapons. I mean, that I think would be the bane of these guys' existence is 2 ranks of Corsairs kind of run up, park 6 inches away from them, and just start to throw, and then you got to charge.
Well, and honestly, that Lothlorien list that we reviewed earlier sits behind Blood's back and forces you to charge, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's lots of counterplay. It's just a very interesting dynamic and mechanic that we haven't seen in the game, and is actually going to change the way you play a little bit, which we haven't seen in a long time. So I'm very excited about it. Also, I really love Dale, so I'm very
Yeah.
biased.
Justice for Dale, right? Wasn't that trending for a long time?
Yeah, it was.
So I like the idea that it's going to make Dale more competitive, but I don't think it's going to make them too competitive, which I like that balance aspect. And I look forward actually to see them being played on the top half of tournaments. So it's good.
Definitely.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say about him? No. All right. We'll move on to our third topic for today, which is a tournament I recently attended. This was a tournament in Mahwah, New Jersey, and I have to say this was probably one of my favorite tournaments I've ever been to. So if anybody's ever considering going to Mythicos in Mahwah, I highly recommend it. It was a very good group of guys. Probably one of the best group of guys I've been to in a really long time. Tournament was pretty decent. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Basically, it was a 650-point tournament. And I took a list that we did on a list review, I believe coming up on the previous, or it was on the previous episode. Basically, I took Suladan with a bunch of Harad. I took Shagrat with some Moranians and Black Minorians, and I took Gurut with Black Minorians and Moranians. My first round, I got paired. I apologize for everyone. I'm not going to remember. I'm terrible with names, as you've heard on the podcast before. So my first round was against the younger gentleman. I believe he was probably about 16 or so. And he took Rangers of Athelion. So I was really quaking my boots, to be honest with you. Because as we all know, when you get 45 bows shooting at you, you're not real happy about it. But I ended up coming out with that with a 9-0 win.
What was the scenario?
It was Seize the Prize.
Okay. So not really what the Rangers of Athelion want.
No, and to be fair to him, he was a newer player. He was just getting into the game, so fair enough to him. He kind of sat back and tried to shoot me, and I moved my entire force over the objective. It took me about 6 rounds to pick up the prize, but eventually I did. And I moved that with Shagrat, and I passed it on to Suladan, and then Suladan walked off the board with his horse. But the only mistake he made was not pushing me. He sat back and shot me, and he got a decent amount of kills from shooting, to be fair. It's just at that point when I had gotten the objective, I had a defense 7 hero with 3 wounds and 3 fate, and I could just basically walk it off the board at that point. But that was his only mistake. You know, he did pretty well for somebody who was just starting off, and it was a lot of fun to play with him. I had a good conversation with him. So yeah, that was game 1, 9-0. Again, I apologize. I don't remember my second opponent's name. He was a very, very nice guy. I hope to see him at the next tournament I go to in Mawa. Very nice guy to play with. He took a Minas Tirith army, and it was very interesting too, because I had never seen this before. It was 2 King of Men and 2 Knights of the White Tower as his heroes. And he ended up taking, I believe, about 39 Minas Tirith warriors to go with it. And he had a couple found court guard in there, and he had, I think, 6 cavalry models. So he had a lot of, hitting power in there and a lot of helping power. And this one was to the death, so it was very simple. And I was telling him about it during the game, how sometimes I just like a simple mission, just go out there and kill. So it was very fun for me. But I realized that on paper, I was out fighting him most of the time because I had the fight 4 with my Black Numenorians. And he had his, fight 3 with the Minas Tirith. But I decided that it was to the death, and he had a banner as well. So I was focused on getting that banner away from him. So I called a heroic combat with both Suladan and Shagrat for the first 2 turns, both times. And I really chunked into his army. I think I ended up taking out 10 models in the first 2 turns with those 2 models alone. And at that point, it was just I got a couple lucky rolls. I'll be honest with you. There were a couple moments where perhaps I overextended and I happened to win because of it. But it ended up working out in my favor, and I ended up 12-0ing that game. It's a very good game, very close game, very fun game as well. So I hope to see you again. I apologize for not remembering your name if you're listening to this, but very fun game. And my last game was against Andrew Palmieri. I do remember him because I spent a lot of the day with him, and we had a lot of good conversations.
Friend of the podcast, Andrew Palmer.
Yes, he has commented. We did a list review, I believe, on the one of the Ringwraith episodes, or maybe it was the German episode. But yeah, it was a good, really good guy to meet. Had a lot of fun with him. He took a Survivors of Lake Town, and I looked at everyone's army. Keep in mind, this was about 12 to 15 people, I believe, were at this tournament. And he was one of the gentlemen's lists I saw where I really didn't want to play him because I knew that with Lake Town, I was going to get shot a lot. I had 8 bows in my army. He, I think, had like 16 or so. But he ended up taking Dane and Bard with the kids. And first...
Wait, he had Dane and Bard with all the kids at 650 points?
He did,
I think you meant Bane, right?
No, I meant Dane.
Like Dwarf Dane? Oh, okay.
Yep. He had
Like
Dane
the guy,
pig.
like the guy in the pig.
Yep. He had
Got
Alfred the kids with Bard on horse, and he had Dane to go along with it.
All right.
He took 7 Iron Hills with the list, and then I think he ended up taking Hilda. So it was 30 Lake Town with 7 dwarves. And then he had the kids with Alfred, with Dane and Bard. Yeah. So I think it ended up having the same amount of models. I think he had 42 total models. And I'll tell you, I must have lost about 12 models before we even got into combat. He just shot the heck out of me. Bard was killing everything in his power. By the time I got into combat, I had one plan. So he was backing up as I was heading towards him.
This was hold ground?
This was, I apologize, let me pull that up real quick. This was the one, yeah, I think it was hold ground. I believe it was hold ground, yes. And I was at the objective, and I had 3 Black Numenorians on the objective. Now, he kept backing up the entire game to shoot me, obviously. And there were these 2 rocks about 6 inches towards the middle, and it was kind of like a cutoff point. So I realized that I'm not going to break him. I'm not going to outkill him. But if I can end the game with more models on the thing, 3 times as many, I will get 7 victory points. I will win this game. So what ended up happening was I was being broken. I was being killed. You know, the Iron Hills helped him out with the fight 4 at the back, supporting. So we were the same fight value. So Black Numenorians didn't make a difference. He seemed to charge in pretty well against the Black Numenorians, which was, you know, to me it was upsetting because, of course, I want them to fail so then I get to choose my fights. But, you know, dice are dice. What are you going to do about them? But he played very well, and in the end, he just broke right through me. I had 1 turn where I had to roll. The game was going to end. I rolled a 6 instead of a 1-2, and then he proceeded to smash me, and he ended up getting a 12-0 on me. So I did technically win this tournament. However, they did have a rule where basically there were 2 people. Andrew was one of them. And again, I apologize for the other person. I'd spoken to you a couple times as well. I don't remember your name. They came in first and second, but because I guess they were a part of this like membership program there, they could never actually win the tournament in the first place. So I won because they couldn't technically win the tournament. So technically I finished third, but I technically also finished first. So it's like a weird little win without winning, if that makes sense to everyone.
Hey, winning on a technicality is still a win.
It's still a win. But it was a great game. I spoke to so many people. There was people from New York City. There were people from the local area. There were people from New Jersey. I think there was one guy from Philly. It was a really good group of people. And what amazed me was it's probably the closest tournament I've ever been to. It was only 3 hours for me. And also they said that usually they have twice as many people go to these tournaments. So I was thrilled because I was happy with the 12 to 15 people they had there. They said usually they have, 30 on an average tournament. So there was more to come for the future. So I was really excited. So if anybody's in the Eastern area and they're looking to go to a tournament, I do recommend Mythicos in Mawa. Is a very good set of tournaments. And they seem to do tournaments every month to 2 months. So just keep an eye out for that.
It's an interesting, they have 30 players, but 3 rounds. I mean, you'd have like 3 winners. Unless you're
I don't know if they changed.
Well, technically, this tournament did have 3 winners, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. But only one technical winner.
Yeah. I have to say,
we seem to have a technical winner every tournament.
Yeah, I'm glad you went though, Tim, because I told you like once John Sigsby took care of Mythicos, like he pours so much energy and time into those events. Like even all the terrain. Did you like the terrain?
Oh,
it was stuff.
Nothing's going to beat Nova for terrain, but this was this was pretty decent terrain for just a pickup tournament kind of a thing. So it's very good terrain that they brought. They brought the Fords of Isengard, which was pretty cool to see. I don't know how well that would do playing because I think it's hard to balance miniatures on it, but aesthetically it was fantastic. They had a Mordor board, they had a Moria board, they had pretty much a lot of different boards you can imagine in Middle Earth were there, and they were functional and they did well. It was very good to play on.
They actually have a podcast, I believe too. It's on Podbean called The Hobbyist Tale. I listened to their like discussion of that tournament. I think they're called Vanguards. So they're kind of like
what it was. Yes.
Tournament organizers, and because they're kind of tournament organizers with him, they weren't allowed to place in the event. But it sounded like Andrew is pretty good because he's like his list sounded pretty nasty.
Oh, I'll tell you, Dane and Bard, they just went through everything, and then you had the Fight For in the back from the Iron Hills, and you had the numbers because of the Lake Town. So it was a very well built list. I have to give him credit; he did very well with it. It's very good to play against. I just have nothing but good reviews about this tournament. I really recommend anyone go if they're interested in the, East Coast area kind of thing. It's in like I said, Mawa. So keep an eye out for that. They only post on their Facebook, though. I don't believe they post on the ASBGA. So maybe I'll talk to them about doing that in the future. But they do post specifically on their website or their Facebook. So if you're looking, it's Mythicos. Yeah, it's very fun. I guess unless anybody else has anything else to say, we'll move on to the Q&A.
Yeah, I've never actually been there, but I've heard really good things about Mythicos and the events that they run there and like the crowd. So
I liked it a lot. You had ample space to sit. You could put your miniatures or.
I've seen some pictures of the venue. It looks good. So.
Yeah, it's good. I used to go there all the time. It's really spacious. The people are nice, and it's got a friendly atmosphere too. You have nobody coming there to power play, so there's like a fun feeling of you just bring cool themed lists and stuff.
They are more beginner friendly because a lot of them are starting to play off the game. Another great thing, if you want to get out to a tournament and you're listening to this but you don't have an army painted, they allow you to take unpainted armies. So obviously we prefer as a community that everyone paints their army, but let's say you weren't able to because you were busy and you just want to play at a tournament, they do allow you to take unpainted miniatures. They just kind of hurt you a little bit in the standings because they do tournament points for each game where you had a painted army. And they also said that 650 is typical for them. They don't really go above 700. So they don't do 800 points. So if you want a different tournament from anywhere on the East Coast, which is mostly 800 or 700, they do something different. Sometimes they say they do 500-point tournaments or something like that. So they do lower points, which is really interesting if you're into that kind of thing. So maybe consider that. But yeah, okay. So we'll move into the Q&A now. So I'll bring up the first question. It is from Jordan Y. And Jordan's first question is, what is one model that is statistically bad that always overperforms for you? Possibly so much so you're inclined to put it in lists. So I'll start off with Matt. Do you have any model like that?
Oh boy. Yeah, this is putting me on the spot. I'm going to take a pass, and I'm going to hand this off to somebody else.
I think everyone needs to prepare for this.
Okay.
Well, let's do the second one first.
Think on this.
I'm like, let me flip through the book.
I got to think on this too. I'm like,
wow. Okay, to the book.
Matt, what is your favorite model and why?
What is my favorite model and why? So
wait. Does that mean model is in profile or model is in the?
I think you can interpret that whichever.
Do both.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think he's.
I think you can interpret that maybe aesthetically or model or profile wise, whichever you prefer.
So, all right. So there's the answer I should give, and then there's the answer I'm going to give. So the answer that I should give is Galadriel, Lady of Light. And for anyone who wants an explanation as to why, we've had a couple of different compilations of like what are the most undervalued or most useful models to bring in an army, and I think she tops mine. And it's a nice model too. I mean, in particular, actually, the Galadriel, Lady of Light model, I think probably comes in second to, I think it's the Galadriel, like Lady of Lothlorien one, the profile that has since gone away, but you can now use as the war aspect Galadriel. I think that's actually a better model. But my actual favorite model and why, as to the one I have the most fun with when I play, and that's probably Gandalf the White. Just because, and we've discussed this on the podcast before as to who your favorite wizard is. He's very expensive, so he's not somebody you take all the time. But I have never not had fun with that model when I've played it on the table, and I think that's who my selection would be.
Actually, Matt, I think I've thought of your answer for the first question.
Oh, okay.
Signal Tower.
Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
I'm flipping through the book and I'm like, oh yeah, that would be.
Does anybody else know theirs? If not, I'll go for mine. I would say my favorite model is Sauron. He's just my favorite from both the books and the movie. He's the bad guy. He's kind of the reason I liked Lord of the Rings. But I would also do very strong number 2 and 3 would be Elisar and Gil-galad. Those are probably my 3 favorite profiles / aesthetically looking models in the game. I just think they are awesome models. Rainier, thoughts?
Yeah, I think my favorite right off the bat would be Amdor, Lord of Blades. I think he looks amazing. He's really, really cool. You don't see him in the movies, so you have like some freedom on like your paint scheme and stuff like that. So yeah, just him mounted is, in my opinion, outside of Huron, the coolest and best looking model out there. Game wise too, I think he has so many different rules to him that each game you play, some of them pop up that you like use, like, okay, like Lord, all these different rules, you know what I mean? Like as he kills, he gets better. So he has that kind of bulk aspect to him. With killing things, killing heroes and all of that. So yeah, that's why I chose him. Outside of that, I really, really, really like the camel profiles and models. So they just look really, really cool. Their poses all look different, and the game style, it's just different. You kill stuff in the move phase, but they're really bad in combat because they're fight 3. Well, not bad in combat, but like they could be. So yeah, I like that. But yeah, right off the bat, probably Amder's my top one. He just looks so cool and plays cool.
Okay, Rob.
So my favorite model is one that you don't actually play with. You at best use it as an objective, but that's actually the Dying Boromir model. And just partially it's because I love Boromir, partially it's because that scene in the movie is just like, it makes me cry every time I watch it, even though I've seen it 100,000 times. And partially because like, I've never seen a model sculpted that literally looks like Sean Bean sad and dying. Like it just captures that element of what it's supposed to represent so incredibly well that it's almost like you look at it and you feel sad, right? If I was going to go for some backups, it would probably be between some of the new plastics that have been coming out. Treebeard comes to mind, the King of the Dead comes to mind, and Eomer come to mind in terms of models. Now, that's all. I'm answering it purely on like aesthetically what my favorite model is, because game-wise, what I would play with, I mean, it's obviously Boromir. You all know that. That's nobody's going to that, right? But aesthetically, if I had to pick like one model that is my favorite, it's the cool dying Boromir pose.
Yeah, I like how you said, well, you know, game wise, it's Boromir, but you know, aesthetically, it's Boromir.
Game wise, it's Boromir the flag. I'll put it that way.
All right, Devin.
I mean, so favorite model, probably the Hobbits, to be honest. Yeah, I think I play them. I originally even started playing them, not even because they were actually competitive. I don't think I even realized they were. But I just kind of enjoy the fact that this army clearly should not be fighting and roaming around Middle Earth and doing its thing. But it's a really quirky army. So obviously it's a supplement the Shire one. So I'm going to say Hobbit Militia just to give it a, but yeah, so I'd say those. You know, as far as profiles, I mean, I don't know. I actually really like the Lingering Shadows profile. I mean, I guess that bouncing thing and the hot thing that he does, I kind of find pretty fascinating in the game. But I mean, obviously, like he's not the best profile in the game. It's just sort of like a cool way to play the game. And that's where I guess, I don't know, like as far as statistically bad model that overperforms for me, I mean, I don't even like, I want to say that like everything I would pick actually, like everyone would be like, well, that actually is a good model. So
yeah, it's
yeah. I mean, I have one that I don't know if people think is statistically bad, even though it's kind of statistically bad. But
I mean, what I would have said was in the previous position, Warriors of Gondor. I think I always played Warriors of Gondor and no one else did. And it would shock people how well it would do in tournaments with just swaths of, which Horde Gondor was a thing. So then once again, it's like, well, of course, that was still a good army. For
me, exactly what you're saying, it would be Citadel Guard on horses with bows. Yeah. And like statistically, they're bad because they're definitely overcosted because they're basically more expensive than a Rohan Royal Guard on a horse with a throwing spear, right? So like objectively on points, they're overcosted and bad, but they always overperform for me, and I put them in every list, and I never regret it.
So Matt, if yours is the signal tower, I'll go ahead. I don't know if this really counts as again. It's like Devin said. A lot of the times we end up taking lists that do pretty well because we take. I'm gonna say Aristor, and I'm not saying he's bad, but he's not like top of the list. And for whatever reason, when I take Aristor in like an all elven hero list, he just kills. Like his throwing dagger hits like every time and kills something. I don't know what it is with Aristor, but he just always seems to do something for me when I take him.
Interesting. Mine would definitely be Denethor.
Okay.
Like I throw Denethor in there because I used to TO.
Bad, though?
Right, but that's the problem with this, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Or just a bad model. How do we judge this, right?
Yeah. Of course, Denethor is statistically bad.
Yeah, statistically.
At 35 points Hero of Valor, he's done his job as soon as you put him the list.
Yeah. But I used to like TO and like create lists as a ringer, and like of course you don't build good lists, and I would just bring Denethor with generic knights and like whatever captains and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is actually really good.
Even from a statistical standpoint, he's not bad. At
But
35 points, fight
here's
fine.
one, I guess. Here's one that pops up. Knights of Minister. Those are ones that I guess aren't always taken always whenever I throw them in. If they just kill everything. So yeah, that's one.
Really funny because for me, Knights of Minas Tirith are the exact opposite. Every time I use them, they fail horribly. Usually fail a courage test and run off the board at the worst possible time, and I hate them for it. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. They always like go to charge in for me, and they let their lance dip too low, and it sticks in the ground, and they end up like catapulting themselves off of their own horse and dying. Yeah.
Every time I play like Reconnoiter or something, they'll get right to where they can run off the board and then fail a courage test and flee, and I'll lose the game. Like every time. So,
you know what? I think I know mine, but only based on one tournament. Throne of Skulls. I brought Barad-dûr, and I brought a siege bow, and it's just Throne of Skulls.
Triple
I
siege bow?
hit one time every game, just once, and it was really weird to keep track of it. But that one hit was Dane on Pig, just made him go flying. Gandalf the White, even through blinding light. Like that one shot that I actually made, like
amazing.
Totally. It was like, I would shoot it the whole game, and we would always make fun of the fact that, of course, it didn't hit. But that one time it did, it made just a beautiful, because people ignore it. They like forget it exists. They're like, oh yeah, the siege bow. Yeah, go ahead and shoot it. Like, and so you don't even play based on it. So I would say that model, one siege bow, like overperformed in that tournament.
It's that clutch shooter. It doesn't matter if he makes the other shots. It's just that last one that matters.
Well, it's just, I think it really was that no one was playing based on it. Like they'd be like, yeah, whatever, just throw Dane out there and who cares? It's never gonna hit. And then
I don't know, Devin. Maybe you also have like unerring accuracy against Gandalf, because I remember playing a game against you with an Isengard bow, and you shot through like 3 in the ways and blinding light my Gandalf, and I was like, how he's got like a million rerollable fate. So maybe you just are good at killing wizards.
There you go.
You should get like a polo you wear to tournaments. On the back it says Wizard Slayer. All right, we'll move on to the next person's question. It's by Chris James. He says, one of his questions, I should say, is does -1 courage ever stack to utilize Severed Head's catapult? Have you guys ever done this before?
-1 courage ever stack? What does he mean? Harbinger stacking? And then
I'm imagining.
Yeah, I think what he's trying to do is get more than one -1 on the roll for Severed
I think there's
Head
currently
catapult.
no way to do that other than drain courage.
I think there's one way to do that, and that's with the Golden King of Abercon.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
but then we're talking about dropping the courage roll, the result. So it's not, I mean, it's -1.
Yeah, I
the only way
mean,
it
same
stacks
effect,
is
different
the
way
riders,
to do it.
right?
It's the only way, I think, to kind of to magnify a -1 courage test, and that's with the Golden King's special rule where he gets to dump will into subtracting something. I can't remember the exact mechanic, but
long story short, Harbinger does not stack. If that's his question, then
Okay.
There's no way to stack it. If you want a list where you want to be like, yeah, I want that guy to run away when I hit it with a severed head, you want to bring the Golden King and the catapult, because you can drop it on the other guy's general. He gets a -1 for having a ring wraith or something near him, and then the Golden King can say, yeah, I'm good, all right, I saw what he rolled, I'm going to drop 3 will into that so he can't possibly pass it, and he goes bye-bye.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, catapult has a 12-inch minimum range, correct?
Does.
Yeah.
And
You
Golden
leave
King
the
has a
catapult
12-inch
behind.
maximum.
Yeah. No, you need
Yeah.
to have your army and your ring wraith and the Golden King out somewhere in advance of the catapult.
You're firing into combats normally, Tim.
Yeah.
You're just still
Okay.
lobbing them. Yeah.
His second question is, when is a Wornhorn worth it? Maybe if using the One Ring with a Sealdor and Rivendell, or a Morgul Knights / Black Numenorians.
I
So
would
in your
say
guys' opinion, when
If
is
you're
it worth
courage
it?
2, it's worth it. If you're courage 5, it's not really. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where I guess you arguably want to be courage 4 if possible, and then I think it also depends, like how many models do you have. So like Goblin Town, they don't care. But if you're playing like I don't know, what was it, Azog's Hunters or something, yeah, they'll typically take it. So I think it's around that courage 4. If you are courage 2 and your lower number count either or, then it tends to be more worth it than not, because being a lower number count, you really need those charges to count. But then it also depends on how expensive your army is and how easily you can get it. So like, if you're playing fiefdoms, then Warhorn's never worth it because you have 4 lines. So I think it really depends. But I mean, ultimately, yeah, if you're playing a seal door, I wouldn't take a Warhorn strictly for a seal door. But if you're trying to get your Courage 3 Numenorians to 4, then sure, that makes sense.
Or you
Don't
could
they
just
get
take
that
a
as their
pure-
army bonus?
Yeah, I was going to say you just.
Oh yeah, then you have an army bonus. So yeah, they don't even care. So yeah, in that case, it wouldn't be worth it really. 30 points is a lot to pay to do something that may not come up in most of your games. So
yeah, I have to say I have never purchased a Warhorn that like didn't come as standard equipment on like one of the heroes I was taking for some other reason.
yeah.
The one that comes to mind for me, at least, is Hunter Orcs. Like I always think in a Hunter Orc list, I would.
I think
Courage
that's the
2
only
armies that can't
only
spam.
rule.
That's the thing. It's Courage 2 armies that can't spam. So like Arnor, the Hunter Orcs, or don't receive it automatically built into their bonus. So Mordor typically should bring one, but doesn't because its bonus provides it. So to get to Courage 3. So I think it's usually like Courage 2, but then you don't spam. It's like
I actually see it,
depends on
a
what you're
Black
doing, too.
Numenorian in Mordor decently frequently, but
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want to do too. Like if you have a combat heavy army, like a Mordor combat heavy army, you want to do it to get them into combat, or the Hunter Orcs, you want to do it. But when it comes to like Harad or Corsairs, I never see them doing it because they just shoot. Like it's like, okay, you don't want to fight, fine, I'll just shoot you and we force you to come fight me. So it depends on your army style.
And then if your army has plenty of bodyguard style troops, like, if you're playing Iron Hills and you have Dane, he drops in all fearless, it's like, who cares about your Warhorn? So like,
one question I have, maybe my screen is obscuring here. Okay, sorry. So when is a Wornhorn worth it? Maybe if using the One Ring with the Seal Door or Morgul Knight's Black Numenorians. So I'd say probably not to the first and occasionally to the second of those 2 options.
I would actually say never with Black Numenorians, just because. Is he saying against or when using?
I'm interpreting it as taking a Black Numenorian / Morgul Knight with a Warhorn.
Yeah,
to which I say occasionally.
Oh, okay. So I mean, if you're taking frontline Black Numenorians, if you want to take one Black Numenorian with it, that makes sense. But like, you would. I find it redundant in Mordor because you just take Fury, and Fury will kind of do that whole thing for you. Plus, they have the army bonus that gives them 1 if they're outnumbering anyway. So that just, that could bring them up to Courage 4, but I don't know. That seems like a lot of points where you could use them to increase your numbers to get that benefit anyway. And Black Numenorians are already Courage 4, so I don't really think you need them to be Courage 5. Same thing with Morgul Knights. They're already Courage 4. Why get them to Courage 5?
I think it was much more of a staple in the previous edition where you didn't have the army bonus.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. And his third question was, a ballista siege weapon shoots into combat. Does everyone suffer hit or only in a straight line?
They just FAQ'd that. So that was just in a recent FAQ because before everyone in the combat was the target. So it would like fling the entire combat backward by technicality. And then they FAQ'd it.
Yeah, and I can tell you right where this is because I'm looking at it. Go to the errata, not the errata, the frequently asked questions for armies of Lord of the Rings, and look in the FAQs that deal with the Dwarf Ballista. And there's a question: how exactly do Dwarf Ballistae work when they target a battlefield target? And it takes you step by step through everything that you do. But the short answer to your question is, once you get into a combat, everybody in the combat takes a strength 9 hit. But it doesn't say this explicitly, but I think this is how it has been interpreted. Only the model that is actually hit gets the auto, you auto die if you don't fade off that strength 9 hit.
Yeah.
And then all the models in the fight get the strength 9 hit. All of them are knocked prone and all of them are not knocked prone. But just the model that was hit, he gets flung D6 directly away. And then if he goes through stuff, there will be additional hits from that and to those models. And that's clarified in that section on the Dwarf Ballista. And even though it says this is specific to the Dwarf Ballista, I don't see why this wouldn't be equally applicable to any other type of Ballista that has that kind of fling back special rule.
Okay. Thank you for your questions, Chris. We'll move on to the next person, which is Charlie Knott. And he asks, do you think half Dale, half Army of Thor is competitive for 700 to 1,000 points? And also, what do we think is the best elite army that is not Rivendell?
So to your first question, it's kind of impossible to answer that with new Dale models coming out.
I think yes. The short answer would be yes. I think they're going to be extremely competitive, especially when you mix match, because I have a feeling the Dale heroes aren't going to be too expensive. So you can kind of keep the Dale horde aspect with even heavy hitting dwarves, and you're just going to come up with like a 45 model ish at 800 points list with like strength 4, defense 8, shooting like all sprinkled within it. So I think it's short answer, yes, it's going to be competitive.
Yeah, I think going forward, yes. I think as it stands right now, I probably wouldn't do it. Certainly not beneath 1,000 points.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's going to depend about the new figures. I mean, by the way, this used to be a very competitive list, and that was back when you could have effectively Dale and Army of Thor in the same army,
right?
So that you could get 1/3 of your army would be Dale guys with bows, and the other 2/3 would be dwarves that killed folks, and you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So what I think is going to happen is most likely, given their addiction to legions right now, is that there's going to be a legion that's going to be created where you can recreate that. That's my assumption, assuming they don't say, oh, only dwarves can be led by dwarf heroes and only men can be led by man heroes, and in which case, never mind. And it's exactly the same.
Okay, so what I want to do before we get into the elite army question, what is your definition of an elite army? Is it purely based on points? Is it based on profile? What do you guys think elite means? Is it in your interpretation of that?
I usually think of it as small, so smaller than average. So if you were to take,
so it has to be numbers based. So you can't go above, let's say, 30 models.
I usually think, well, yeah, theoretically, yes. I mean, because otherwise you start to hit normal, and spam will be the complete opposite of elite. So I often think of elite as like, generally it's a smaller force, but the stats are above normal tier profiles. So
a smaller quantity of higher quality troops.
Yeah, basically.
So
Robert said it.
Would you consider, for example, Fountain Court Guard at like 40 models? Is that not elite army?
No,
it's a spam army.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So
I would consider though, like the banner with a whole bunch of Fountain Court Guards and Lady of Light as kind of an elite army, because you have like the killing power, you don't die. I don't know, because we're kind of basing it off the Rivendell, and Rivendell is like fight 5 or 6 heavy army, small force, doesn't.
Does Iron Hills make it in there?
Yes.
Well, I think Iron Hills does.
Yes.
So
I still wonder if it depends though, because you can build out a pretty spammable Iron Hills. So I don't think just simply having Iron Hills. Like if I say I have a ballista, a bunch of captains, and all Iron Hills, I mean it's more of an elite army for sure, but there is a way to spam it out where it's not really elite.
Yeah, even so, I mean, you can't really spam Iron Hills. I'm not convinced that there is a way to really spam Iron Hills, just because the base purchase price for the figure is so high.
Well, spam is probably the wrong word. I mean, get it to normal numbers of 39 models at 700 points, I think can be done. So it's like, it is an elite army,
So I guess
I think
what we're all getting at
in my book.
What we're all getting at is that old legal maxim: you'll know it when you see it. You'll kind of know an elite army when you see it, right?
Yeah. You'll know it because you outnumber it.
Yeah.
I would go ahead and I'd say Erebor Reclaimed personally, if I were to pick one. But you guys might differ in that. I understand.
I'm not sure you're wrong about that.
Yeah.
Heck, you could even do like a Durin's Folk Durin, like
but
King's Champion.
When I take Durin's Folk, like I'll give an example, right? If I were to take Durin with a King's Champion and a Dwarf King, and I even took all what are the shield guys in front? What are they called again? Dwarf Vault Warren teams. I could still take I think 18 sets of Vault Warden teams, which is 36 models with all those heroes. You know, you can get so many models in Durin's, folks. So for me personally, I don't think you can consider them elite because I can get so many models with them. I can get 45 dwarves with Durin's folks.
So it's elite in this sense, right? You could either get 36 models, 18 sets of Vault Wardens, or you could get a decent used car.
True. Oh, we're forgetting about Ranges of the North. I guess they would be considered elite,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
Ranges, I don't know if
Ranges of the
they're
North
good,
are not
though.
the best.
But they're not the
bad.
best.
They're an
elite,
elite
but they're not
army,
good.
but they're terrible. Like
I would put Thranduil's Halls in contention. I think I'm torn between a couple of different armies. One of them is clearly Champions of Erebor, but I think Thranduil's Halls is another one that's in there.
So are we just saying like an elite army is just stat? Like it doesn't matter how many numbers you have; it's just stats above like.
Well, that was my question, right? Like, so on paper, Iron Hills probably have the best profile in the game for troops, right? Because they're fight 4, strength 4, can be defense 8, and can have fearless, right? So on paper, does that make them definitives, or are we going based on amount of? So that's why I kind of wanted to define it at the beginning. So if we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick with what we originally said, we said amount of models in a force, and let's say that we said that army can't go past 35 models. What
at 700 points, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll say 700 points, 35 models at 700 points. What are you guys picking up if you had to pick one army? Maybe it could just be Rivendell, right? Maybe.
Well, no, it can't because the criteria is best elite army that is not Rivendell.
No, that is not Rivendell. Okay, fair enough.
No, Rivendell, Tim.
No, darn it! I wanted to. No, I would say Champions of Erebor personally.
All right, I'm sticking with Thranduil's Halls.
For me, based on the criteria I consider to be elite, it is Iron Hills of some variation. So either pure Iron Hills or Erebor Reclaimed, but it's based around the Iron Hills list. And that's also assuming no allies, right? But
yes,
that's what it is for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd ally bash something when it comes to like Gondor, Fiefdoms, Rohan, possibly even Lady of Light. That's what I think when I think of elite. I think of like the Polish meta, to be honest, where you see like low 30 troops with a whole bunch of heroes with defense, strike, blinding light, and magic resistance, to where it's just like you don't see a weak hole at all, to where the numbers don't even matter because you can't even get through the numbers. So that's what I think. When I think elite, I just think back to our episode with Jacob Yakov from Poland on like his list builds and like the polls.
Yeah, I agree. But assuming no allies, I'd say Iron Hills for me. But I agree completely with you. Like that's what I think of for elite, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it kind of almost, it's like weird on the definition of army, because I mean, if you say elite faction, then sure, I agree with you guys. Iron Hills is an elite faction.
You're right. It depends on what you fit into a list, because you can't really say. I actually like the way Devin phrased that better, which is the better elite faction compared to.
And I think that's what he's asking, because he says,
if he's going to say that,
it's not Rivendell.
I'll probably, and then it's like, are we ignoring legions? Because you have the Rohan Legion that I know it just got nerfed, but I haven't assessed whether or not that nerf actually took it out of being.
Well, then that's another question, right? Like if you get 35 cavalry, is that considered elite? Even though
no, I'm not talking about that. The Rohan Legion, you don't play at 35 cavalry, you play it as 9 heroes.
Oh, I know. Okay,
I
thought you were talking about the other one.
If it was faction, I'd go Iron Hills. They just have like a lot of tools to bring. If you want to bring like a small list, that's kind of hard to crack.
Mm-hmm. The way the question is phrased, best elite army that is not Rivendell, is it itself open? Because Rivendell, are you talking about Rivendell Knights? Or you're talking about like an infantry Rivendell? But the way I'm interpreting the question to be meant, which is like a single faction, I would say Iron Hills.
Yeah, I'd be on yours too, Rob.
All right, and we'll move.
I'm going to go against the mold and say Far Harat.
Far.
I want it to be.
I see.
No, it's not. Don't
just take a bunch of half trolls. Just put them on.
Half trolls and camels.
That's true. It can.
I'm actually perplexed that Rainier's not going for Khand here, but you know.
Well, Khand can be.
I don't think
Khand
is elite because they're so weak, and you kind of have to.
Not if everybody's on a chariot.
But
that's a bad army. It's not the best.
I know, but
I
would think that Rainier would be up there defending them. I'm just saying.
No, I'm gonna join the people and throw tomatoes at them.
And then there's some armies that are not elite, but like you could play like Moria. There are ways to play that kind of elite heavy. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, and you could also argue that like Corsairs are somewhat elite because they shoot really well and they have really high
Yeah.
stats, even though they
I
have low
think most people
defense
think
and
of them
numbers.
as
But
Yeah.
like, it's just not what I conjure in my mind when I hear elite.
We're like on this
Yeah.
on this
This
segment
is-
of
this is my-
defining elite.
Yeah, this is my 60-figure elite army.
Right?
Like,
Evan,
Yeah,
that's
no.
gonna be the name of the episode. Defining elite.
Yeah, because I think this guy's talking about like low numbers because I did like when I was thinking elite, what is my elite? And it's just Dalamir popped up into my mind with Corsairs. But yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah, you know you have an elite army when you are outnumbered by every opponent that you fight.
If you need blinding light, your army's elite.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you for those questions, Charlie. I'll move on to the last one, which is great name, Giraffe Deity.
we should put that banner on our Harad force next time.
He asked about the viability of stacking ring wraiths. Is it? We'll start off with the first one. Do you guys think it's good to have 2 wraiths at 600 points?
It depends. I mean, what
Are
kind
they,
of
yeah, are they
talking
basic?
about? Are we talking about basic race? Then if it makes sense within the context of your list, then yeah. If you're talking about named, that still though, I'd say it argue depends. Like if you throw the Witch King and Shadow Lord in a 600 point list, what is that, 240? And you're not throwing them on Fell Beast maybe, and then the rest of it's spam out of Orcs of Mordor, and then you have a final like captain.
Well, I think as weird as it sounds, like out of the 5 of us last episode, I was the only one on it with Mick and Evan, where we actually went over this with like all of our lists. Whoa, Matt's got a gun.
I do. Oh, sorry.
He doesn't like our answers, guys.
yeah. No, yeah, but like we kind of just discussed this. Y'all weren't there, and the episode's gonna pop probably in a few days. But yeah, that's all we talked about was list building with ring wraiths. I know I brought in, who was it? The Witch King with Kamul at 800 points, both on Fell Beasts with spam Black Numenorians and Morannons with Spear and Shield in the back, and Soladan with Cav, and I got like 40 models with that. So I think you can stack them. We talked about like 3 generic wraiths and the Mouth of Sauron, different types of things, but I think there's a lot of viability with stacking ring wraiths.
Yeah.
I've seen Suladan plus double generic wraith on horses work really well.
Mm-hmm.
So
What about
Yeah, so,
3
yes.
at 800?
The answer
3 at
is
800 is very possible. Yeah, I think you could get the Witch King with 2 generics. You could get, like Rob said, 2 generics, probably 3 generics and Soladan at 800. I think it's just very possible because they're customizable, and all the named ring wraiths do something different. So you literally say, okay, I need blinding light, aspect, anti-shooting. Oh no, I need more combat, Kamul, and it's just, I think it's a really good thing. And I'm surprised, not so much surprised, but I think the meta went against ring wraiths, but I think you can kind of lean back into it and
What about
still be
3
very
named?
competitive.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's I think
Yeah.
becomes too rich a mix.
back in the day, yes, but now
I
days
made a
past.
list where I believe it was the Undying on horse and 2 Kamul and the Witch King on Fell Beasts with 40 Morannons and a drummer at 800 points.
Oh,
So I don't
well,
know if you guys would consider that, but
I would consider that if you can get all that into one list. I would definitely consider that. So maybe I stand corrected. You had 3 named ring wraiths and 40 Moran and orcs in that
I
list.
think it was 38 or 40 with a drummer.
And 2 of them are on Felbies. Yeah,
2 of them are on Fell Beasts, yep.
the question I'd ask about that is, would you consider that elite though?
no army with 40 Moran and orcs is elite.
It's the 40. If you had 39, I'd say it's elite, but the 40 makes it not
39,
elite, so
the
it's
average.
like-
39 is perfectly acceptable. It's fine. It's Matt. Remember when we
It's
did the
that one
ranking
that
of the
puts
ring
it over.
rates
Yep,
where
yep.
6 was the cutting point and 7?
Yep.
I think you could
That's
take
right.
9 ring wraiths at 800 points. Run the Legion.
Yeah. No, I remember that. I can't remember what we were ranking, but
We were ranking
oh,
the Dark Marshal.
the Dark Marshal, where like 6 was tolerable for you, but
Yes.
7 was reprehensible.
7 was no, unacceptable. And actually, Devin, he has one last comment for you. He says, I was surprised to hear Devin rank the Dwarmer like so low. He said he's been playing a list with him at 600 points alongside the Tainted and loving him. He says he plays them because they are the only wraiths I have, but I discovered fun strat synergies with their special abilities. What other dark synergies do you guys see for ring wraiths?
I guess as a quick response to the yeah, I mean, as far as ranking them, I mean, hey, someone had to rank low, right? But
I had Dwarmer like a 10 too, so I don't know why it was just you he was upset with.
Yeah, I think everyone
he's
kind of ranked
terrible.
I assume he heard you put the Dark Marshal at like third, and he's like, yeah, all right, I'm ignoring Tim.
His opinion doesn't matter at this point. It's
no, I mean, so it sounds like you're having fun with the models, and that's good. And I think, yeah, play them. I mean, I don't think our ranking was to say never play this character except for the Knight of Umbar. We all said do not.
Yeah, never. You can like paint him as a statue and just leave him there for your Umbar bird.
He is probably serving more purpose there.
Well, and the Undying too, not so great. So
well, then you might want to listen to the episode. I kind of yeah.
Well,
like
we had him at like 5
Those
and
are some
above.
fighting.
We had him at like 5 and above.
Yeah,
we're
still better than the
Party, like,
Dwemer Lake though.
Well, the Dwemer Lake we all ranked universally low.
Undying's really good. We're at a tea party like drinking. Rob just like shows up and starts smashing everything.
No, I'm just gonna flip a table
We don't
and
have
leave.
someone to start controversy. We need Rob to step in. So,
I mean, I will say this: if there is a ring wraith out there that's going to create a dark synergy, and by the way, I love that phrase. I think somebody needs to start a band with that name. But if there is a ring wraith out there that creates dark synergies, the Dwemer Lake is the guy that does that just with how he works. And I think, if you're going to take 2 named wraiths, he's definitely somebody that I would think to throw in there as either your second or third wraith and just have him run around there on a horse or something like that, casting his damping field around to deal with spells. I think that's the way you use him.
In combination with other damping sort of effects, the Dwemer Lake can be effective. Like he has a use. I think in the episode I talked about him being so low, it's by the time he's done reducing someone and casting spells, it's really like 1, maybe max 2 heroes he's really affecting, which is why and that's maybes, right? Like, 'cause you still got to get a 50-50 roll, and then but yeah, I mean, he definitely has uses. I guess dark synergies for ring rays. I mean, ring rays ultimately anything that keeps giving negative modifiers. So I mean, I see Golden King. I see. Unless we're just strictly saying ring rays.
Well, yeah, which I think he is. I mean, the other one that used to exist, right, was the Undying, with his ability to kind of get back the will from other ring rays casting spells, and
then he was amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, and that, I mean, as we discussed in a couple episodes ago, yeah, that's kind of been nerfed to the point where I'm not sure that's the greatest thing, but really the synergy wraith, I think, really at this point is either the Dwemer Lake or who's the I think it's the Tainted. Is the Tainted the one who prevents people from getting the benefit of other people's
the combo he's using is literally the one that he's saying he has a lot of fun with, which makes sense because they are pretty decent together.
Yep.
I mean, he's having fun with it. I mean, that's it though. I mean, otherwise they don't really it's their spells that you can say kind of synergize, which all of them have. So
I guess the other one that I throw out there is like the killer caster combination, right? So like the Shadow Lord and Kamul, for example, where Kamul's the guy who's gonna, the Shadow Lord's the guy who's like keeping you safe from shooting and casting all the spells. He's your support wraith, and then Kamul's the guy who swoops in and actually kills stuff, or Witch King, Shadow Lord, or something like that. Some sort of killer support wraith combination. And I think there's a couple different ways you can do that.
Yeah, or even the double killer like Witch King Kamul, and it gives you like that old sense of just like shenanigans with 2 fell beasts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let us know though in the future if you still want us to continue to do these. We'd like to do these every few months, get you guys' questions and answer them. Let us know any list reviews as well and any ideas you might have for us for the future. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.